$175 million. There's more evidence that this guy is an omnivore. When he was ordering breakfast tacos with Barack Hussein Obama, Jessica, he ordered a potato, egg, and cheese. No chorizo, potato, egg, and cheese. I have questions that I'd like local reporters to ask Low T Tallarico. Does James Tallarico even own a gun? Is James Tallarico a Cowboys fan? A Houston Texans fan? Does he even know the Spurs are playing tonight? Has Tallarico ever been to a football game, or is he more of a World Cup guy?
Wait, what does that mean?
Sorry, yeah,
I
sorry.
like the World Cup.
Does Tallarico own a truck? Does he believe in premarital sex?
Jesse.
What, you wrote that down?
We're running out of time.
Does Tallarico wear women's underwear? These are the things local reporters should be pressing him on.
Yes.
Just
I mean, oh my God, those guys are hilarious. They're scumbags. I mean, there's really no other nice thing to say. What a complete bunch of scumbags. That's them talking about James Tallarico, a seminarian, a decent human by every measure, who's running for Senate against Ken Paxton, which I won't show you. Ken Paxton, who was impeached by his own party. Ken Paxton, who put his girlfriend, his mistress, on the payroll at a free job with no work attached to it. Ken Paxton, who they're standing up as a manly guy. This clown's calling Tallarico, Low T Tallarico. This incredibly, what some would call punchable face, is the one criticizing James Tallarico. Okay, for unbelievable, and that's Fox News. That's towards a decent human being by every measure, because he had the audacity and the temerity to win the runoff and is now running against Ken Paxton, who is a criminal, a no kidding criminal. But it doesn't end there. Let's see more of what this kind of this is misogyny, folks. It really is. Even if it's directed at a man, this is what they think. This one's really super special. This one.
When Tallarico goes in for a blood test, when he gets a physical, blood doesn't come out. Instead, soy milk comes out. This man has less testosterone than Jasmine Crockett. It is a mind-boggling choice. They would choose a person to run for that office who looks like he doesn't belong in the Senate, but in a cabaret show. Look, at the end of the day, I have a hard time believing that the people of Texas, some of the toughest, roughest, strongest men and women, the pioneer heritage, the frontier history from the Mexican-American War through the Alamo and everything else, are going to choose somebody with that much soy to be a U.S. senator compared to a real conservative, patriotic, God-fearing, and truly beloved statewide figure in Ken Paxton.
They should have nominated Crockett. I can't believe I'm saying that, but I mean, he should have nominated Crockett. That's how bad it is. Well, we'll be following.
I mean, yeah, that's what they're talking about. Truly beloved, God-fearing man. Ken Paxton is on the record with witnesses of having multiple affairs throughout his public career, of using his public office to enrich himself. You guys, this is weird. You may not remember this, but there was a time when the Republican Party prided itself as the family values party. I know it's hard to believe right now, but this Nosferatu-looking guy is talk about low T or manliness or rough and tumble. This guy, this weird looking with resting vampire face, is the guy criticizing James Tallarico and other men and raising up Ken Paxton, a horrible human being by every measure, okay, who's used his office. And we now know that just this week, Ken Paxton's office released a friend who raped his son's friend, a boy, for 3 years and was convicted. It should have had decades in jail, ended up doing 60 days is what they offered him. And he was let out in 30 days for good behavior and will not even be registered as a sex offender under Ken Paxton. That's Ken Paxton's view of the law. That's the guy that Fox News is promoting over James Tallarico, a seminarian. That's who they believe. That's the upside down we're in right now. But it goes to something larger, doesn't it? It goes to just unbelievable. The misogyny level is so bad now on the right and on the MAGA movement that they're doing this to a man. But don't forget, did you hear the little jab in there on Jasmine Crockett? He has less testosterone than Jasmine Crockett because they had to get a jab in on the black woman, right? That's what they do. And that's why we're having the show this week. So we should have had this a month ago or during Women's History Month, but sometimes luck falls in your lap and you get the right guests. So we're gonna have two guests this week. And I'm really excited to talk to both of them because it ties in exactly what we're facing in this moment. This is a man. Imagine what our women are following. Imagine what women face daily. If a woman has the temerity to step out in public for public office, or temerity to step out in culture and pop music, to temerity to stand out and use her voice like Taylor Swift or Jasmine Crockett, what do they face? Let's talk about that. Let's talk about, because guys, women are not a special interest group in America, no matter how much you want to say they are. 51% of our population is women. And the fact they're treated like they're some sort of special interest group separate from men tells you how far we've gone down the rabbit hole in America in 2026. And I say this as a white, cis, straight male. We are down a rabbit hole of how we treat half our population. So we need to have a conversation about that. And I'm not a woman, but I'm happy to host that conversation. I hope you'll stay with us. This is two great conversations today. So welcome to On Democracy, the FP Wellman. I'm FP Wellman. We're going to have a great conversation with two very smart people. I'm glad you're here on a Friday night. I hope you're here every Friday night. Before we go any further, make sure you've hit that like button. Make sure you hit that share button right now on your social media channels because we have a great show. And if you don't share it, nobody's going to see it. Let's get on with the show. Oh, welcome back. I'm still Fred Wellman. This is still On Democracy, the FP Wellman. Every week right here in the Minus Touch Network. Look, this show is a thoughtful show. Okay, I'm not rage baiting. I'm not attacking. We're just showing the reality. Okay, and if you call that opening rage bait, you're looking at the wrong people rage baiting because it sure as heck ain't us. We're trying to save our democracy right now, and we have to have conversations about that democracy right now. So I am thrilled to have another brilliant guest on the show. I'm joined by Allison Butler. She's a senior lecturer and associate chair and the director of the Media Literacy Certificate Program, the Department of Communication at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. She's got a new book out. Allison joins her new book, The Judgment of a Gender, How Women Are Centered in the Silence of Pop Culture, is a fascinating book. So let's get Allison join this show. It's great to have you.
Hi there. It's super good to be here.
Allison, I didn't show this book. I gotta show the book cover. I'm the terrible host. Ta-da!
Thank you.
There's the book. Allison, thanks for joining us here on a Friday night. I really appreciate it. So, what do you think as you watch those opening videos? I love your perspective as somebody who's an expert and discusses these issues of culture and pop culture and media. What do you think as you watch those attacks on the man and then the subtle little jab on Jasmine Crockett as a little shiv, right? What were you think as you watched that?
Sure, absolutely. Well, I mean, the Jasmine Crockett comment was no surprise at all whatsoever because rarely a moment goes by, particularly from white men, particularly from right-wing white men, especially on Fox News. Rarely a moment goes by where an insult for a woman of color is passed by, right? I mean, any opportunity, it's a tale as old as time, right? But I think, what I argue in the book is the ways in which, as the subtitle is the ways in which women are centered and silenced in pop culture. I do focus the majority of the time on how women are treated, but I also at the end I want to make sure that at the end of the book I wanted to make sure that we didn't think of this as one-sided because patriarchy absolutely unequivocally hurts women. There's no doubt about that.
Right.
Patriarchy also hurts men. Right. And when we look at somebody like James Tallarico and the way that his name and his kindness, his Christianity, his maybe lack of bluster, lack of bravado is insulted, that is how patriarchy hurts men, right? That patriarchy has a very strict, narrow definition of who belongs in power. obviously women are easily left out of that, certainly women of color. But I would say also our boys and our men who do not fit that mold are also harmed by patriarchy. If you're not super macho, if you're not, I mean, even in that introduction of like, does he own a truck? Does he own a gun? Like, if you don't
To
have,
do a football game, like,
does
okay,
he go to a football game
I
or does
mean,
he like
the
the
hell are we
World Cup?
talking about here? Yeah.
Yeah, so all of this is ways that, patriarchy absolutely, unequivocally hurts men as well.
That is such a great way to open the show. Well, what drove you to write the book now? I mean, you've been teaching this for a while. I know books take a couple years to write, especially something academic like this. I mean, as you're talking to students, I know you're a lecturer as well, and you also have a place in the Project Censored. Which tell me what drove you at this moment.
So I was invited a few years ago to write a book chapter about the censorship of gender. It was a larger edited academic book on global censorship and increased global censorship. And I was asked to write a chapter about gender. And I got into it and started doing all of the research and kind of started making the connections with my own work of critical media literacy, now more focused on gender. And it was a book chapter, and it was amazing. Like, it was such an incredible writing opportunity, such great people to work with on that text. And yet, because it's a chapter, it had to be really short. And
Tight.
the longest footnote in that chapter was, here's all the women I know I've forgotten. Like, I know I've left these women out. I'm not ignorant of this, but there's only so much room in a chapter. So when the opportunity came to make it into a book and to be able to expand that, I jumped on it as fast as I could because to be able to work with the censored press was I knew was going to be incredible. Such amazing friends and colleagues doing such good work for independent media and pushing back on the sort of corporate monolith that is our media system these days. But so I finally expand what I wanted to write about. And yet I will say, still so many stories ended up kind of cut and pushed aside because there's only so much room in a single book. Um,
Yeah.
but just the opportunity to be able to discuss it more and to expand the study was really what drove me to do this.
I get it, and you go into a lot of. I mean, I enjoy how you kind of touch on a lot of things we've watched, Gamergate,
Mhm.
punk rock women. I mean, it's not just it's not even mostly politics at all, right? It is really how women who occupy when women come in what are been traditionally male dominated fields, and we see that. Let's go to the football example. We now have women football coaches who are stepping out.
Sure.
I, of course, am in politics for a living. You talk quite a bit about that. What happens to them, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, when we so here's the thing is like we've had women to some extent in the public sphere for as long as we've had humans, right? I mean, this like women have been pushed aside, there's no doubt, but to push somebody aside means that they were trying to take up space, right? So we have women who have been trying to take up space, have been taking up space for as long as we've had human beings.
Right.
When I sort of the subtitle of the book, How Women Are Centered and Silenced in Pop Culture, I really kind of wanted to work within that contradiction. How is it that
Yeah.
these bodies can be taking up more space but are also silenced? Because what we're really looking at is who's telling the stories? How are the stories being told? What are the rest of us who aren't public figures? How are we being invited to understand these stories, right? Our pop culture are our greatest storytellers, right? Our radio, TV, film, newspaper, magazine articles, our books, our social media sites. This is how we learn about the world. Short of us being able to experience everything, which of course would be impossible, we learn the world from our media. So what are we learning about women? What are we learning about women and girls from our media? Their stories are being told in a particular way. What happens if we try and look at those stories a little bit differently? That's really what I wanted to do was see how can we look at these stories differently, and in looking at them differently, maybe have a more complicated, complex understanding of gender.
That makes a lot of sense. And what'd you find? I mean, did something shock? I mean, you've been studying this for a while, and as you wrote these stories, as you talked to these women who have said themselves and have stood up, were you shocked by some of the stories you found, or at this point, is it pretty much just what you expected?
I mean, I really try very hard not to be cynical, as I feel like cynicism is like
You're in the
the
wrong
end of the
business, sister.
conversation. Uh, So I really tried to not be like eye rolling, like, oh yeah, here we go again. Although to be honest, sometimes there was that. But yes, absolutely. I was shocked and surprised and disappointed. And then also, um, you know, definitely bolstered and buoyed by a lot of the work that is being done, right? When we look at maybe some of our recent history, the last 10, 20 years, we see really harmful treatment of women who are in the public sphere or sort of thrust into the public sphere. Um, Anita Hill and the Clarence Thomas Senate hearings for the Supreme Court nomination is a perfect example. It took years before we re-looked, we revisited Anita Hill, right? It took years before we revisited ice skater Tanya Harding to say, hey, maybe we treated her terribly, right? When we get to somebody like Christine Blasey Ford in 2018, arguing at the then Senate hearing for the Supreme Court nomination of Brett Kavanaugh, it takes minutes, it takes days before we have the narrative, before we have the story that says, hey, wait a minute, here's a woman with a credible story that we are ignoring. Yes, the end result was the same. We have two credibly accused sexual predators on the Supreme Court. No doubt about it, right? They have a lifetime position. I get it. The end of the story is the same problem, but the way in which the story got told was different, and that's where like I refuse to be cynical because we are definitely doing something slightly different. Between Anita Hill and Christine Blasey Ford, we started to get more laws. We started to get more vocabulary. The idea that we talked about sexual harassment and sexual assault at our dinner tables, that there are phone numbers that can be called. Is that phone
Yeah.
number going to solve all of our problems? Absolutely not. But that employees have an outlet, that they have a place to go, that there is some conversation, that there is a paper trail that can happen. That is different, right? Doesn't solve anything at all, but it shows that there is like a hook, and with that hook is how we can start to make change. And so many women had to fight so hard to get that. And this is a way that we can revisit and reappreciate them and look at them differently.
I love it, and I try to be. It's funny, in spite of all things going on in the world, I try to make this an optimistic show, and I think you're right. I do. I kind of, as I was reading the book, that's what I like too. Is we are the time to target is shorter than it is, but you're right. We do still have the same result, right? I mean, even today, I mean, you mentioned problematic women by name, like Michelle Obama, who's still in the public eye, is still faced the same kind of critical mess. Are you seeing? As you look at this, is there a divide? Like we look at Fox News as the extreme. Do you see movement? So we always talk about the extreme side. Are you
Yeah.
seeing progress on this other side? I'm not saying necessarily the left. I mean, like, but you know what I'm saying? Do you see men? I mean, because I'll just be very honest. I'm one of the men who found the Me Too movement eye-opening as a man. And I've talked to my fiance. My fiance is a business professional. And it was interesting to me that she's had conversations with male colleagues who kind of went, oh, wow. Like I was raised in the 80s. I'm 60 years old. You know, we were raised at a different time, right?
Mhm.
And my fiance, who is younger than me, but came in, business in that time frame. She said it just seemed like there was men who recognized, wait a minute, we are part of the problem. I joke a lot about the meme, are we the baddies? And I think a lot of men, I'm one of them. I admit it freely. I'm one of the men who saw the Me Too movement and said, oh crap, I've been part of the problem, right? I was raised like Jesse Waters and Stephen Miller and Greg Gutfeld laughing, who clearly didn't get the message. Did you see progress that among many men, and regardless of political, like many men said, wait a minute, am I the bad guy here? Do you think that's a thing, or did you see that in your research? Have you seen that in your work as a professional?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, I think, when I think of the students that I work with who are college age students, roughly
Yeah, that's
18
the
to
place, right?
22,
Yeah,
for a lot of them, especially when we look at that age group right now, coming 6 years out of COVID, right? Some of their most important social and emotional development happened in isolation, right? Happened in quarantine, especially here in the Northeast, right? In Massachusetts and our surrounding areas where we had very strict quarantine rules.
yeah,
So all the times that, the horror that is middle school for most of us,
yeah,
where we learn all kinds of terrible life lessons from all sorts of awkward moments. Like these young people were largely sheltered from that while they were simultaneously exposed to obviously the horror of COVID. But these young people have never not known a world in turmoil. So the ways in which they're learning, most of these young people are born post 9/11. Most of my students are born post 9/11.
Yeah.
They've had their conscious memory is of not one but two of our current administration. They have seen wars start within their adolescence and young adulthood that don't seem to have an ending. So the ways in which we are learning about the world are incredibly confusing, and we see that bad behavior is rewarded, right? We have I don't think that that is exclusively on political lines of left, right, blue, red,
Yeah.
etc., right?
Yeah.
When we look at bad behavior, when we look at folks being kind of nasty and name calling, yeah, absolutely. We're going to see that on our Fox News because it's salacious, because it's grabby, it's going to get our attention. But we're going to see that across the political spectrum, right? And we're going to see, we can see it in this presidential administration who has been cruel to members of his own party who
Yeah.
somehow counter what he's saying, right? Never
Right.
in my life would I thought I would be on the side of Marjorie Taylor Greene. I absolutely disagree
What
with her
planet are we on?
politics, right? But like, why the name calling, right? Why call her name? Same thing with Nikki Haley. Totally opposed to Nikki Haley's policies. Not at all interested in supporting her politically. But when Don Lemon came out on CNN in February of 2023, when she was considering a run for the presidency
Yeah.
and referred to her as somebody past her prime, that's an age comment directly connected to gender, and that's a member of the Republican Party, right? Nikki Haley. So we absolutely see. I think we think of, when we think of progressive politics, obviously we're thinking to some extent on the left, but we can harm people no matter what the politics are. And I think that's what we're seeing these days is just this open platform and a very tall platform to allow for cruelty. And cruelty can absolutely cut across genders. I think women, and particularly women of color, disabled women, queer
Yes.
women, trans women,
Yeah.
are going to get the brunt of it so much more. Uh, and also that opportunity, that ability for any one of us to say, oh, I see how I can be a part of this. I see how I might have contributed to this. And then maybe take a beat and go, and I think I want to do a self-reckoning and some
Right.
self-reflection. Welcome to the party. Sorry you
Yeah.
came late.
Right.
No
Right.
worries. Welcome to the party, right? We all
And
do.
I
And
love that. I love that because that's what we
yeah.
have to do right at this point. Because a lot of us, hey, look, I'm 60. One of my favorite sayings my fiance uses is, you're not a tree, you can move.
Mhm.
And we have to recognize that people change, that all of us are living in this very fast changing society. We're going to have to welcome people back to the fold, right, at some point. And it's hard, I know, because we want to condemn, but people do change. And something I think it's a perfect place to go next, and probably the last question is your conclusion, though, is media literacy is the key to change. That's what you do
Yes,
for a living. It's just circling back to this where we are here on an independent media channel. I
absolutely.
consider myself an independent. I'm not necessarily a journalist. Maybe I call myself a pundit. But having said that, I mean, tell us about. I mean, you think talk about how, and then of course I always like to weave into that here on my show. Our wonderful followers are very passionate about. I would want them to have something in their quill and that they their quiver that they can use to make things better. So tell us how media literacy is this. Go. I'd love to hear more.
Okay, so if we think of critical media literacy, we're looking at ways to analyze our media. And then when we put in that word critical, we're really doing an interrogation of power. One thing I tell my students all the time is that to be critical doesn't automatically mean to dislike. It is
Right.
easy to be critical of stuff we dislike, much harder to be critical of what we do like, right? But
Right.
to be critical really is to take a little space, it's to take some distance, it's to look at our object of inquiry from a bit of a distance to see it as multidimensional, right? To give it depth, to give it breadth. And so critical media literacy is to look really closely, to be in a process of continuous critical inquiry. We want to keep asking questions about our text. What does it mean when our news anchors, well, first of all, we'd have to say, is Jesse Waters a news anchor, right? then we have to talk about the news industry. But what does it
Yeah.
mean when our public figures engage in name calling? What if we do kind of find that funny? What does that say about like the world that we live in? What does it mean that we can come up with a really fast set of insults that actually have nothing to do with policy, right? The whole time we see those insults of quote unquote low T Talafrico, where are his policies? What are his plans? What is he going to be doing for Texas? We never got that information.
No,
We just
no,
got name calling. So did
right.
we actually learn anything, right?
No, right.
And so, then maybe we look more closely at geography and say, what other news sources are available? Like, what else could people be learning from? Maybe not, right? We could be living in a news desert if that's the only source of information that is available in our community. It is going to be really hard to figure out ways that it might be biased
Yeah.
or wrong or misinformed if we don't have anything to compare it to, right? Or to counteract it with. So that's also what we want to do, is try and bring in other information. How else can this story be told, right? What are we being encouraged to believe? Uh, so it is, and I obviously, as somebody who teaches this and researches with this is something that comes into my classroom. This is something that comes into my work. But what I really want with media literacy is that it's our homesteader conversation. It's what we talk about over coffee or maybe cocktails in this current political environment. It's what we talk about at our dinner tables so that we all understand and can know more. And in media literacy, the absence of data is data. Whose story isn't being told? Who isn't invited to tell their story? That might help us understand how the story that we are seeing or reading or listening to is being constructed. So I think the way that we can get ourselves out of our current just like quagmire of mis and disinformation and terrible treatment of our fellow human beings is through critical media literacy. We think about who's on the screen, and that's hugely important. There's no doubt about it, but we also need to think about who's behind the screen, who made all of that possible, who greenlit the stories that we're watching, reading, and listening to, because that's where the money and that's therefore where the power is. And that might be what we also want to be interrogating closely so that we have a better understanding of the texts that actually come to our screens, our spaces, our homes.
And you just described politics too. You described my other job.
Sure, yeah.
Which is who's behind it? Where's the money coming from? And now
Where's
there's
the
so much powerful. There's a lot of powerful, not great men who are behind a lot of the media and behind our politics, and that's where we transition back to Fox News and James Tallarico. So, well, I guess the most important question I've got to ask an author is, where can they find the book? Where they can find more about you, Allison? I'll throw it back up on the screen. Throw
Sure,
it back on the
thanks.
screen for us there, Satchel.
Uh, well, I'd like to give a real shout out to Eliza Sharp, who did the cover of the book. I just think it's so beautiful and so stunning. You can find the book anywhere that you find books. Obviously, I would prefer you to get it at your local independent bookstore. Censored Press has copies available. If you're not a big paper reader, as it were, there's a digital, like an audio book version of it as well. And it's really beautifully narrated, not by me, thank goodness. And so there's multiple modalities. Again, I would prefer anybody who wants to get it, please go to your independent bookstore. Please request it from your independent bookstore. Let's give our independent bookstore some props. Let's give Censored Press some props. Yeah, so it's findable wherever you purchase your books.
Perfect. Well, thanks
Yep.
for joining us. I appreciate it. I was looking forward to this conversation. Thanks to your team for getting you here and your patience with getting us. But I'm just so pleased to have you on here and on the My Touch on a Friday. So thanks I look forward to talking to you again, and good
Thanks
luck
so
out
much.
there.
Yeah, good
Good
luck
luck
to
with
you
fight.
too. Good luck on that
Appreciate it.
campaign.
Yeah, never a dull moment.
Exactly.
See you soon. Thanks for
Take
joining us.
care.
Another great conversation, eye-opening to say the least, right? And when you see the nesting of the issues, the misogyny and the weird bigotry and sexism and just weird stuff from the vampire Nosferatu, Stephen Miller, throw it at James Tallarico, a decent human being by every single measure, you have to question. Then you talk to Allison about how this all plays for both men and women, but mostly especially women, which is really what we're talking about. Again, as I said in the opening, women are not a special interest group. Women are half our population. And the fact that they face so much, like, so I've been working with a guest for a while, and as life goes on, she's a very important businesswoman, and I'm a mess. And I just, as I looked at this show, I realized what Alice told me, I really wanted to have our next guest. So we're having a special episode of not one but two amazing guests who are smarter than I am, which is always, I admit it's not a big lever to get it past, but nonetheless, so I'm thrilled to have another voice in this conversation. Her name's Danni Eickenhorst. She's a restaurant owner, a very passionate advocate for our region, most of all, a community builder here in St. Louis, the region. And she always says she's trying to lead the region better than she found it. But mostly, she owns several restaurants. Her primary focus day to day are two restaurants, famous ones here in St. Louis. You know, it's the Fountain on Locust and Steve's Hot Dogs. Let's get Danni on the show. I want to have this conversation continue.
Hey, good
There
morning.
she is. Good to see you again. Thanks for your patience. You guys will laugh that Danni and I actually met last week on the show. We said, you know what? Let's talk next week. And here you are, and I appreciate that so much. I showed you a little bit of the intro before you came on, and my conversation with Allison, and we were talking about the women who are going into what are traditionally male roles, and the kind of friction they've run into. You're a businesswoman, you know, and you and I talked in the past about how you feel like, do you think you've seen a double standard as a prominent businesswoman as opposed to perhaps your partners who are men?
Oh, for sure. Oh my gosh. I think, I don't know. I feel like at least in St. Louis, men are allowed to have the vision and the women are
Yeah.
expected to ask for permission. And there's a lot of that. And obviously what we just saw, it goes both ways sometimes. And I can't believe, sort of the language that's coming out and the misogyny that we see every day. And I think my approach, at least in St. Louis, has always been like, you're going to have the most problem with me because you're the most scared of my growth and the things that I'm trying to do, but really let's either grab a shovel or get out of the way. We have some things to do. Right? We're
Yeah.
just like you. We're trying to fix a broken system.
And I want to, before we go further in the conversation, obviously, it's a national audience. You're known here. So we're in St. Louis. Could you tell a little bit about your journey, who you are, and how you got to where you are at this moment as a leader of our community?
For sure. I think like a lot of people, I think I've lived a lot of lives. But in the things that have informed where I'm at now, I've been a nonprofit leader. I was a communications person for the Salvation Army, working on a global level and teaching them social media strategy for fundraising. I owned a marketing agency, and through that marketing agency, I created connections that led me later on to where I'm at now. I was a COO running businesses, all of the sort of side businesses for Keller Williams International. So I'm both operational and visionary. And through all that, I think my passion for doing community work kind of bled through all of that. It was like the through line. Through all of those roles, I was able to do some really important things in the St. Louis region and leave an impact here. And so I partnered with one of my clients from the marketing agency, Steve Ewing. He's the lead singer of a band called The Urge, and they're internationally known. And he had a restaurant, Steve's Hot Dogs, that we partnered with and sort of changed it, turned it around, and we relaunched as partners right before COVID. So it's just a whole lot of hustling and figure things out because we reopened that restaurant March 1st, 2020.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God.
Yes.
It's where I lost my company 3 months later. So
Yes. No, right? It was just
I didn't survive COVID. So the fact you're here talking to me says a lot. And
yes.
as a new business.
Oh my gosh. And so we were like 3 employees in 2020 and now we're around 150 6 years later. And we've got 3 different concepts and we really weave in this community work into everywhere we go. We just anywhere we invest our money and our business, and our time and energy, we're trying to make sure that we're meeting the needs of that community as well as much as possible. Sometimes we do it really well, sometimes we don't, but we're always trying.
Right. And that's the key, isn't it? And and Allison talked a lot about how women misstep in traditional male role. We talked about a little bit at the top. How do you, so as you've grown this business, have you, and it's not just this business. I think you had such a fascinating career in general. That's why I want to talk to you. It's easy to focus on what you're doing today, but you've been a woman, a leader in a lot of roles. And you did go from sort of PR, which is a lot of women, and most of my company is women, by the way, but into now you're in a leadership position in our community. How do you see, how does that conversation shape? Because you're stepping into a role as a woman, as a leader in this city, an old city with a very diverse audience. Do you face backlash as you show your voice? I mean, I remember you talked to me recently that you have found that when you use your voice as a woman, especially on political ish, I say ish because they're local ish. Do you face more backlash as a woman, you think?
I do think so. It's interesting. I was thinking about this after our conversation, really about how it's changed over time. When I
Yeah.
was first coming up, some people are always leaders, right? Even as a child, I
Right.
was a leader, probably a little
Yeah.
bossy.
Yeah.
But that's I just always have been. And when I was new in business, I would learn to couch my leadership in sort of questioning and carrying myself like, oh, I don't know. Could you please tell me? And that's how I would make my entrances in rooms so I didn't intimidate people. And I still find myself at times having to revert back to that, especially in political situations. Oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't realize. Could you tell me? Because I'm trying to lead them to going where they need to go. And so there are different ways we have to carry ourselves as women, and there's different kinds of intimidation that come at us as women because I think oftentimes we're trying to lead companies, we're trying to build community, and we're trying to change the world. I've noticed that across all the strong women leaders
Yeah.
that I work with. It's a different approach to business, but we also sort of get this very visceral reaction oftentimes coming back at us that can be very personal. It can be really scary. It can be bullying, intimidation. Here I led a charge on some liquor license legislation that needed to be. It was taking 9 months for businesses to even be able to get liquor licenses to be able to invest in our city. And I wanted it to be easier and I wanted there to be less discrimination. And through the course of that, there were whole campaigns launched against me and my family and my businesses. And I know that that wouldn't have happened to a man in our city had he just been leading in that. But there's a lot of intimidation that I noticed that women in this category fall victim to, for sure. You just sort of have to find a way to be fearless, and it's not easy. I mean, that's what therapy's for.
Your own sister, and and that's true. I've got a little echo there, but it's okay. So as you've done though, as you take those stances, are you finding a community amongst fellow women business leaders? I mean, how has that helped you? I mean, it has building your own tribe, if you will, been a part of that? Because we have seen so much change. Since we were talking with Allison about the Me Too movement, but a lot of ways you do see. I've seen more women, finding tribes. Have you had to build a tribe of your own? And what does that look like?
Yes, I have, and I do. I actually have a group of women leaders that I'm friends with, and we call ourselves the Strangers. But it's just this badass group of women CEOs, nonprofit leaders, business owners, and we just go hiking and kayaking and whatever, and we get it out there. And it's really interesting to just see us all out in nature, just being regular people, but we all understand what's there the rest of the week and we can lean on each other the rest of the week, and it's my favorite group of people that I can be with. And it really, that's I think the biggest part is in these roles, because we are who we are, we're continuously pouring out into the community, into the people that we're serving, into our employees, and our cups can get very, very empty, and finding ways to refill them is a big deal. And so yeah, I have an amazing, amazing network of women, and part of it's my friend that helps me. She's always introducing me to the next great woman I need to know. And I just feel so incredibly fortunate to have them in my corner, and I'm absolutely in theirs, and we lean on each other a lot.
And that next one is guys like me. I like to portray myself. I like to see myself as an ally to my fellow Americans of all types. What role do men have to play as part of your tribe? I mean, and what can we do better? I mean, as you talk, I mean, you got male partners. All your partners are men. Steve's obviously very a personality of his own, lead singer of a band, and you know how that goes. I mean, and I mean, what do you see when you're looking for a partner as a male in business and as an ally of public service? I mean, how do you think we can be better what we do to be partners?
You know what? I think uh, it's understanding and supporting the vision. I think asking how can I help, and sometimes women are viewed as the bad guys sometimes, and it can be hard for us. I think we fall into this trap of likability. We need to be liked. We need to be.
Right. Yes.
You
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Because it can be so hard and scary to step out on the front lines of stuff. So sometimes as a man, if there's an opportunity for you to be the bad guy on our behalf, please do. I mean, truly,
Apparently, I'm good at that.
just every now and then take some of the pressure off. I think that's what I ask of my business partners. That's what I ask of my husband, who's a partner. I'm just like, hey, just today, give me a minute where I don't have to be the bad guy. We're all rowing in the same direction. You know why I'm about to be a bad guy right now. Could you just do it
I
for
love
me?
that advice. That's the first I've ever heard that, and it's so true. My daughter's an entrepreneur like you. I think I've told you, and she owns a business in Virginia. And it's true. It is. I watch the things that she's faced as an entrepreneur versus my entrepreneurial journey as a small businessman, and it shocks me that they are different. There's a very different framework around their leadership and how it faces. And you're right. And the backlash to them as women is very different than it is to me as a male. And it's important to me. I love the idea that we just have to be every now and the bad guy, but that's an understanding of who we are as leaders. Another one, it's a little bit of transition, but it's not. I mean, we also are sitting here in very divided political times. And Missouri, St. Louis especially, is an epicenter of that divide. It's funny, if you understand the history of Missouri, we've always been a divided place. We've always been this place in the middle of this country that has its own divides, and all the larger divides of America come in sharp focus right in streets in Missouri, right? The Delmar divide, where between black St. Louis and white St. Louis, the fact we've got a city and a county that are separate entities because of white flight. This goes back to Lewis and Clark, if you're being honest about it, right? How do you build businesses in this time? Because your business do span those divides. You're all over. You had, unfortunately, you suffered greatly because you were on Delmar during the tornado that hit, which we talk about separately, but your business straddle those divides in a lot of ways. Your partner's black, like how do you build opening and welcoming businesses in these divided times? Have you thought about that? Is it a conscious decision, or is it something you just do naturally?
Well, it's interesting. So years ago, I worked in politics. I ran a political campaign, sort of the natural progression of the community work I was doing. And I remember the executive director of the organization I worked for. She looked at me one day and she goes, "Danni, you are so politically tone deaf." Because I wouldn't play into the favor trading, and I just said, "Honey, this is parks and trails and transportation infrastructure we are trying to make happen in St. Louis. I don't need to. That's the right thing for us to do. I know what we're trying to do, and we just need to do the right thing." And I remember thinking in that moment and in that week a lot about, like, I can let her crush me, and I can let her take away sort of my idealism, or I can continue being who I am. And I have decided to continue being who I am, and that's what I carry into my business. We invest in communities. We do work that we really believe in, and we just do it because it's the right thing to do. And sometimes there's negative repercussions. And I mean, Pride Month starts in just a couple of days, and every year we go all out for Pride because we are a safe space for people in the community, and we want to support programs that are doing work to make our state and our city a safe space for people in our community. And every Pride Month, we get those 1-star reviews, and we get people that are boycotting our businesses, but it's still the right thing to do, right? And so we are just never going to stop. We're just never going to stop. And it's difficult. We're going to always run up against this, but we also have our people, and we have our tribe of customers, and we have our, just our people in our world that support what we do. And they, we're going to continue to curate them, and we know they're going to show up at the end of the day.
Yeah, and it's living your values. And I found that my other job, like if you're very, I think people on all political stripes respect people who just wear their values on their sleeve and never waver from them or never bend to them. If you look at the backlash, probably Target's a perfect example. They had certain values. When they were questioned, they ran from them, didn't they? And that's not the way, and that loses you more, because you lose both sides, don't you?
That's it. That's it. And you know what? I just, yeah, I think you just have to determine who you are and what you're trying to do. And for us, we believe that we want everybody. Yeah, there's this little community goal we have of leaving a good impact, but we're also at the same time trying to do hospitality differently. Hospitality has a bad reputation for a reason. We haven't figured it all out, but we continue to consistently increase wages. We continue to consistently, bring in new benefits. We continue to try to improve culture in this industry and give people just a little bit of a different experience when they're working for us, so it's not what it's always been. And part of that is that we want people to be able to grow. I'm a business person that got into restaurants, and so it's a little bit differently. And so what we bring education and leadership and business knowledge, and we pour it into these people, and we give them lots and lots of opportunities to grow. But we know that they can't grow if they don't feel safe first, and that means their race and that their gender identity. And we don't do it perfectly because we're always learning and growing, but we just keep doubling down on it. And so I think we know that's the right thing to do, and we just keep trying to do better.
Yeah, it's a great way to put it, because it is your value set. It is setting it's hard in business because you are being buffeted by the winds of profit motive, right? You have to make a profit, and you are in a business that's got a very small profit margin. I know, and from family in that business. I mean, do you find yourself at moments, fretting over your very strong public positions as you look at profit margins? Or is that something you just have accepted as your role?
Yeah, let me tell you, like you hinted at earlier, last year we had 2 restaurants get hit by a tornado. And these restaurants were intentionally invested in a community along the Del Mar Divide, where on one side you've got the has and the have-nots, and the have-nots is a historically Black community, and the haves are typically white and wealthy. And we built a restaurant right in the middle to create a gathering space for people on both sides, and for it to get hit by a tornado and everything to change. And it wasn't really that it like knocked down our buildings, right? We were able to physically recover, but our community was gone and devastated, and nobody was coming to help us afterwards. And we reopened our doors, and every day from June until January, we lost money every single day. And we're just a small family-owned set of businesses. We don't have backers or investors. And so it's been really interesting, and just as a leader, to go through that experience where we were on a track and we were doing good things for our people. And then suddenly we're just taking loss after loss after loss. And it took away our resources to live our values. And so this year we had to finally pull the cord and close those 2 locations, and we did have to lay off some staff and reset our organization in order to survive for the greater good. And we're living in this economic moment that we're living in right now, which is already putting strain and pressure. And so to be a leader that has a set of values and not be able to deliver, that's hard. That's been really, really hard. And so this year, it's just been a lot of 12-hour days, 6 days a week, trying to get back to a place where you can get to living your values, because you feel like you failed in a way. And sometimes, you talk about that gender aspect. I think that probably take it harder than a lot of my male counterparts, because I am so heart led. In so many ways, and you feel like you failed in a lot of ways. But it's leadership in this way, as a woman or not, is always a journey. I'll tell you.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. And we are in tough times. Like I know you guys are facing it. I talked to one of our fellow business owners, a guy named Shane, who they own 2 upscale restaurants, and they had 2 moderate scale restaurants. And the upscale restaurants are doing great.
Yes.
And the moderate scale restaurants are not, because people of me and people of working, I don't even call it working class anymore. I call them working people,
Yeah.
salaried people are struggling right now. I know you're seeing that in real time in your business, aren't you?
100%. And it's such a dichotomy. I got to sit in with actually a Federal Reserve panel of different hospitality people recently, and one of our counterparts, I'm saying, listen, people just don't have it to spend anymore. And unfortunately, I have to pass through the costs that are coming to me. Maybe
Right.
food has leveled out, but insurance has double tripled. All these other things. I still, in order to keep my doors open, I have to charge what it costs to operate this business, and my people can't show up anymore and pay that, and they're angry at me. And meanwhile, the person next to me who owns a series of very high-end restaurants said, I can charge anything I want. They're going to keep paying. And I thought, what an interesting time we're living in, that there is such a dichotomy and a bifurcation of our economy and how people are feeling it.
Yeah, and it's scary to me, because there's a cliff. I mean, you cannot continue that path before a cliff drops out, and we're not seeing that hope. So I guess a great place, because I do this on the show at East Spotted, being a helicopter pilot and a pundit, and the other job I do. Where do you see hope? I mean, you've had a rough couple years. The tornado recovery has been a disaster. I don't want to relive that. I know, for those who don't know, this is not her first rodeo. She also did tornado recovery in Joplin. If you know the history of Missouri, terrible tornado over a decade ago. Where do you find hope in these moments? Do you find hope, or where do you hope we'll see change?
I surround myself with some pretty amazing people, and I think that's where I get my hope from. I mean, I would love to say it's my kids, but my kids they are my hope. But I also see what a hard time it is to be a teenager right now, and the things that they're growing up in. And I'm just trying to, I'm not giving it up and handing it over to them yet. I still want to make the change so that their life is a lot easier when they get here. And so I surround myself with a lot of great leaders, and they are my hope. I just finished a 1-year program called Leadership St. Louis. It's effectively a master's in civic movement and making a difference. And I was in a cohort of 60 people just like me who see hope and who see a roadmap for it. And we just spent the last year developing a roadmap of the ways that we want to change. And just knowing that I am surrounded by such incredible leaders, I know we're not alone. I think that the media wants us to think we're alone, and I think the media wants to think we're one or the other. And I'm not falling for that, right? My dining room is the exact example of what a great cross section of people we have in America and why we can't keep cutting each other off. We have to keep getting to know each other. We have to keep, talking to one another. There is reason to hope. And so I try to create the hope in my spaces by creating these gathering spaces literally for everyone, not just for people that believe like me. And I think that just continuing to seek out people that are like-minded, that just see that there's a path forward, recharges me every single day.
Ah, that's a great place to finish. So tell us where they can find you. Where's the best place to find? And your restaurants is more important.
Well, I'm the CEO of Hustle Hospitality. You can learn more with hustl.group, and you'll learn all about our restaurants there. You can find me on socials. I'm STL Danni, St. Louis all day long, STLDANNI. And
I've been following for a while.
thanks, bro. I really appreciate what you're doing, man.
Thank you. I appreciate you too, Dad. Thanks for joining us. Have a great day. Great conversation. So great way to finish the show too. So thanks so much. I'll be talking to you soon. We'll probably eat a meal soon.
I love it. Talk soon.
Talk soon. What a great conversation. And I know this show's a little longer this week, but I really want to have these two conversations. And I hate when, breaking news gets you to push guests. And then I saw an opportunity to put these two wonderful voices together and have this conversation. And I want to finish on another, I won't go long here, but this is a shocky story that came out. You probably won't see it anywhere, but I'm telling you this story because, I live in Missouri, and Missouri is a unique little microcosm, as I mentioned with Danni, of the larger issues we face in America at the moment. And one of the struggles we have here is that Missouri, if you don't know, is a supermajority state, Republican supermajority state. And what that means in our system of government here in Missouri is that the Republicans don't even have to listen to Dems. That they could, if as long as they have a unified caucus, they could do whatever they want. And that has resulted in some really crazy things here in Missouri. One of those recently was that just a year ago, the governor got the idea to get rid of the capital gains tax. And the estimate would be $100 million a year, $150 million of losses for the government. And we were running at the time, we were running a massive, a budget a surplus. It was great. No big deal. So they cut the capital gains tax, the first state in the union to cut capital gains tax, which affects about 1% of our population, the people who live on their stocks and bonds. It blew a $600 million budget hole in our government. $600 million in the first year alone. And it's getting worse. It's not getting better. And so this year, our legislature met. They only meet for about 3 or 4 months a year. And they met and they had a budget deficit now instead of a whole, and so they decided to do what you would do. So the first thing they decided was to address this budget deficit. One, they're going to try and get rid of the income tax here. Right. The main funder of funding. And then two, they decided to add $10 million more to our vouchers program, which was already a $15 million program, but they're going to add another $10 million of that. But hey, they weren't done yet. They had to cut things. I want to show you this headline from today from the Kansas City Star. Missouri has cut funding for Dolly Parton's free book program. And for kids in Kansas City, it's huge. But what it means is there was 165,000 Missouri children enrolled in the program, partially funded by the Missouri government, that was getting them free books. 45% of our kids, 6 and under, were getting free books. Instead, that was costing us this $6 million a year last year. 165,000 kids. Instead, they transferred $10 million to a school voucher program. The school voucher program has only helped 6,411 kids last year to the tune of $50 million. That's over $8,000 per kid. 98% of that money went to religious or parochial schools. So the supermajority Republican majority in Missouri decided it was more important to help another 1,000 or so kids go to private religious schools than 165,000 of our children getting free books. That's a decision they made. And so we have a chance to change that this fall. We've actually got the highest percentage of Democrats running for office at the state level in Missouri in decades. I think 98% of our seats are being competed now. Just in the district that I live in and working on, we could actually flip 6 of those seats for the state house. And that would mean they only have a 3/1 majority right now, supermajority. If we break the supermajority here in Missouri, they just did in Mississippi about 3 months ago, they can stop just this kind of thing. They can stop dozens of bills a year on transgender student athletes or taking away rights from us. We can stop stupidity like putting abortion back on the ballot after we voted for it. That's the kind of help places like Missouri need. So as you think about places you can help, I hope you'll think about places like Missouri, where just this week we discovered that $10 million are going to go help a couple of thousand kids go to private school, but $6 million are taken away from helping kids read. And that's the priorities of the Republican legislature. That's the same priorities of the Republicans who we saw at the top of this show smearing James Tallarico and calling him low T because he believed in helping children and not stealing from them. That's what we face today. So that's the fight we face here on democracy. So for our democracy. With that, I won't keep any longer. It was a great long show. I appreciate you being here. As always, I'm Fred Wellman. This is On Democracy, FP Wellman, every Friday night at 7 p.m. Eastern, right here on the Midas Touch Network. Please like and follow. Please send your friends the link so they can watch it themselves. Send us notes. Make a comment. I love hearing from you. I appreciate all you do. And as always, check out our Substack. That QR code in the corner goes right to our Substack, fpwellman.substack.com. It's free to join. You can join to pay. It helps pay for all this empire we've built, me and Satchel. But if not, certainly all the content's for free. I'd love you to keep up with us that way as well. We're talking about a lot of important things on there. In the meantime, we'll see you next week. Please stay safe out there. Enjoy this beautiful summer weather. Thanks.